What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another edition of the Gators Online Show. I am Keith Niebuhr of Gators Online, joined by senior reporter Zach Alberverdi. We got a lot to talk about, and we don't have a ton of time because Zach's got to get some sleep. As we're recording this Thursday night, he's got to get on the road Friday to get up to Nashville for the SEC basketball tournament. We're going to talk hoops. We're going to talk football. But before we get to both of those things, we got to do an ad read. We got to pay the bills, and we got a really good sponsor right now. So, Zach, take it away.
Absolutely. As you guys saw last week, we got to welcome in a new sponsor, Big Game Football Factory, which is producing what is Florida's football that they're using in 2025. You guys have probably seen it already on social media. Florida put out a really cool video about how they got the balls ready for spring camp. And you can get your hands on this as well. The official game ball of the Florida Gators. Head to biggameusa.com and use the code GatorsOnline to get 10% off your entire order and free shipping for a limited time. The Gators designed the ball with Big Game USA to ensure that they're comfortable with it, so it's truly one of a kind. Start your collection of Florida's official game balls today. Perfect order for tailgates, autographs for your favorite Gators, and for gifts as well. Again, that code is Gators Online to get 10% off, and you can head over to biggameusa.com/Gators, and it's a very, very cool ball.
Yeah, it is. And, I'm still waiting for mine, Zach. So we'll see if I get that. You've got one. I don't have one. I'd love to have one. Zach,
we're gonna make sure that makes its way to you.
Well, and if I get one, I'll probably give it away to some kind of charity anyway. But it is a really cool. It's a great gift, quite frankly. It's a perfect gift. Zach, a lot to talk about. Football just finished its fourth practice of spring camp.
Yeah.
And there's already been a lot going on. You met with Billy Napier. You and the rest of the media met with Billy Napier on Thursday afternoon after practice, early evening, I guess. You've now been to 4 different media viewing windows, 15 minutes each, where you get to go into practice and kind of eyeball some things. And what are your early impressions 2 weeks in? Give me a few thoughts here.
Well, first of all, I would encourage Florida fans out there that want to read a little bit more than the 15 minutes that we've been observing each practice. Go to GatorsOnline.com because we put out an insider on Thursday with some intel and some juice from the first week of camp from everything that's taken place over the course of the first week. So make sure you guys go check that out because a lot of interesting nuggets and developments with the team. But, I think just watching what I've been able to see and certainly some things that I've been able to hear, there's a lot to like. There's a lot of positions that have stood out so far. I think there's some guys that have stood out individually, but also on this at the same token, there has been a little bit of a damper, I think, on spring ball the first week because of the injuries. Obviously, DJ Lagway at quarterback not throwing so far. We've kind of reported where things stand and what our expectations are moving forward in camp. Andy Staples also had a great piece at On3 as well as our insider. So, right now it's been the Harrison Bailey show. Tramel Jones has been continuously getting more reps as he's recently got cleared from that foot injury that he had. But I think anytime you don't have your starting quarterback out there, it's a bit of a bummer, especially when you see all the things that Florida has around the quarterback on offense. And the same goes for defense, Keith, where the full defense is just simply not on display. I mean, there's multiple injuries in the secondary. Florida's probably top 2 defensive linemen, projected starters, are both out. The starting middle linebacker, Pup Howard, is out. So we're not getting a full sense of what that unit is going to look like. But nonetheless, there's still been some exciting guys on the defensive side of the ball that have stood out the first week and made some noise on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, your insider that you wrote earlier Thursday was great. A lot of great juice in it. And not just, what do we say, sunshine and rainbows. And, You know what I mean? There was some there's some concerns. I mean, there's
sure.
Injuries, like you said, looking for one of the things you had was, and we can give one thing away here, Zach. They're looking for vocal leaders to step up on defense.
Correct.
That's significant. That is a significant note, something that people that are maybe not in the football program may not realize how important that really is. Some
Sure.
takeaways from Billy Napier's press conference Thursday. A few things stood out to me, Zach. I'm going to get your take on this. One, he raved about Jaden Ball. Big surprise there, right? Says he's hungry. He got a taste of success. So it's like, you throw some fresh meat in the water, and the shark comes up, gets a taste of it, and wants more, right? And that's Jaden Ball right now. 673 rushing yards, led the team last year. He's leaner. Weight isn't that much different, but he looks leaner. He is leaner. He is doing all the right things. He's hungry. He's motivated. And yet at the same time, and I covered him in high school, so I got to know him a little bit, he's keeping humble, according to Billy Napier. Billy Napier also said, I thought this was the most interesting thing he might have said Thursday, Zach, and I want to get your take on this because you just touched on the secondary and how they're missing all these pieces. And Billy Napier said, it's something that I never thought of. He said that the secondary is a lot like the offensive line. Well, who would have thought that? In what way, right? Well, in the way that continuity really means something. Well, you only have one quarterback on the field at a time, most of the time. Running back, one or two. Tight offensive line, they got to have continuity. Tight end, you have two at the most. Receivers are kind of doing their own thing, right?
Sure.
Linebackers doing their own thing. They got to know where other people are. Defensive line, they got to know where they're at, but they're each kind of doing their own thing. But the secondary's got to all work together back there. And he mentioned that. He said, listen, it's great that these young guys are getting these reps. They're valuable reps. But on the other hand, we as a program are missing out on the ability to build that continuity that is so important. So take it away, Zach. How important is it? And what can we say about this?
Yeah, I think that's probably, as Billy alluded to, probably the most noticeable thing that you see about the defense when you've watched them so far in spring is just that they are missing so many key pieces of that secondary. You mentioned the lack of vocal leaders and some of the leadership void that we've seen on defense. It's a mix of guys not being out or guys not being out there that are injured, and also some of the guys that they lost from last year. Shamar James, Cam Jackson, Bridges, Jason Marshall Jr. Like these guys were leaders in the locker room and leaders on defense, and even some of those guys that I mentioned were hurt at some point. And still provided that presence on that side of the ball. So you're looking for that. I think it's kind of hard to expect that from some freshmen and some second-year defensive players in the secondary that are now being asked to kind of play starting snaps and play with the second-team defense. I mean, Billy Napier said it on Thursday. He looked out there at one point in practice, and the second-team defense was entirely true freshmen, which kind of shows you kind of where the depth is at, because they've got guys out at all three levels of the defense. So they're needing some of these young guys to step up. One thing we did learn on Thursday night, Keith, is where some of these guys are playing in the secondary, because they're cross-training a lot of these defensive backs, these young defensive backs, getting them reps at the safety spots, getting them opportunities at star. But, I mean, you just look at the secondary. They're down a starting cornerback. They're down both of their top two nickels, and they're down their starting strong safety in Bryce Thornton. So that's four guys that are projected starters, play starter level minutes that are not in the rotation right now. So at strong safety, it's been Greg Smith that's getting a lot of chances to run first team next to Jordan Castell, and Josiah Davis has been kind of getting a lot of reps at star too. And this is a big opportunity for them.
Yeah, interesting. Obviously, Greg Smith was a guy that was kind of a late find on the recruiting trail. Like, he wasn't a guy on anybody's radar. Florida discovered him mid-fall, really started to push for him, and then got him on board. Zach, we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about. We're 9 minutes in here. We haven't talked about, really dug deep into DJ Lagway yet. In the media windows, he hasn't thrown any passes. He is doing a lot of simulated, mimicking the quarterbacks. Yeah, mimicking the quarterbacks, except for throwing with the ball. So he's doing all the handoffs and the footwork. And gosh, he looks fluid out there from what I've seen. I've been to 2 practices, and looks effortless in his movements and all that. But what's the latest on him? Do we think he's going to throw it all this spring? And I know the answer, but I got to get you to say it. But do we think he's going to throw it all this spring? What's the level of concern? You've written about it today. What can you tell us without giving too much away from your insider? We still want to get some people in there and get some subscriptions. But what can you tell us?
Yeah, I mean, I think that right now, I think it's fair to say that while it might be a concern with the fan base, and I think just with where things stand with the offense to not have DJ out there, but I will say, in speaking to sources and kind of getting a feel for the situation, there's not a level of concern from the staff, or I think the medical side of things. They know exactly what DJ's situation is. They know what timeline they have him on. They know what the plan is. That they're obviously not getting into details about that with the media, but it's clear that he's got a shoulder injury that is keeping him from throwing. It doesn't need surgery right now, and I think that they want to keep it that way. So they're taking every precaution that they can to make sure that he's 100% for the fall. So it is a bit of a bummer that he's not out there and able to kind of build on what was a really strong finish to his freshman season. I don't expect to see him throw at any point this spring. Could that change? Could he decide toward the end of camp that he wants to give it a go one day, or does he simply save himself for the spring game and maybe throw some passes? Does he just play and hand off the ball for a few series? Does he throw some short passes? Like, I don't know what that could look like. But hey, maybe they will keep him out the entire game, let it be the Harrison Bailey show, and just continue to rest him to get him to fall camp. But that's kind of where things stand right now.
Yeah. And I want to point out that Billy Napier on Thursday said, oops, got something on my computer. Billy Napier said on Thursday that, hey, look, we as a staff are doing a lot of things to keep him involved, mentally involved, mentally sharp. So he's calling, relaying plays to the other quarterbacks, I guess. He's doing the simulated drops that we talked about. He's getting a different view of things. He's getting a different perspective. And sometimes guys come back from injuries or whatnot, and they've learned some things because they're able to kind of take a step back, and they have a whole different vantage point of things. And so they're doing everything they can do. Every day there's a daily plan, we should tell you, to keep him involved. All right, I'm going to run down. Let's do about 3-4 more football questions, Zach. Then we'll get shift over to basketball. We talked about the quarterback position. It looks like Harrison Bailey is kind of taking charge at the number 2 spot. Makes sense. He's a veteran quarterback. Number 2 running back. What can you tell us about the number 2 and 3 guys? We know Ball's the dude. Any movement at the second, third spots, which, by the way, those guys get a lot of carries.
They do
5+ carries for the second, third guys last year. So what can you tell us there?
Yeah, I mean, I actually thought that it was one of the biggest position battles, or could potentially be, heading into the spring, just because, and I think maybe folks forget, but like Trayon Webb was the established, number 2 running back all throughout last offseason behind Montrell Johnson Jr. At the start of the 2024 season, through the first 4 games, he was the first guy off the bench in the rotation. He had moments where he kind of had success. Obviously, he was able to produce when he got carries, and then he had the injury setback, and that opened the door for Jaden Baugh, who kind of really took advantage of both him and Montrell Johnson getting injured. But really, the injury to Webb opened the door for Jacoby Jackson, and really, I thought that going into the spring with Webb, we didn't know what his availability was going to be, but we expected him to be available in some capacity. He has practice. He's not in a non-contact jersey, but it doesn't seem or sound like he's still going through things full speed. He might be limited. And one, that's creating an opportunity for Katie Daniels to get some more carries. But really, I think it's kind of cementing Jacoby Jackson as the number 2 running back. Keith, he's had a fantastic camp from what I've heard. And I've talked to some people that are pretty plugged into that running back room. He was a standout in the offseason. Tyler Miles raved about the guy in the weight room and said he's basically been one of their vocal leaders. Jake Slaughter raved about the guy, but that's translated to the field. He's also kind of taken on a leadership role. One source told me he's one of the funniest players on the team as well. And Jake Slaughter kind of likes how he calls guys out. And he tells you if you're doing a good job. He tells you if you're not doing a good job. So there's a lot to like about
Yeah.
Jacoby Jackson. I think it's transitioned now into more who's going to be that third back between Webb and Daniels.
Okay. Yeah, I like Jacoby Jackson. We sat next to each other at the games last year. He's a guy I always liked. I thought he did a lot of good things, got a lot of wiggle to him, good one-cut ability, all that stuff, good lean body. All their backs, with the exception of Ball, are sort of built similarly, quite frankly. They're solid, they're lean. And Ball's lean inside. He's a little bit wider than those guys, or wider in the thigh region, I should say. All right, Zach, J. Michael Sturdivant, one of the probably 4 or 5 players on the team that I think the fans seem to be, when we post up on the message board about him, they run to read it, right? So you talk to program insiders, sources with kind of shed some light on what's going on.
Sure.
Is this guy as good as advertised? Like, they think he's tall, he's fast, he can be the deep threat that DJ Lagway really needs this year. What do they think on the inside about this guy? Is he going to be as good as a lot of us think he could be?
Well, Keith, you know, and I think that you've reported at Gators Online, and we talked about it at the time, but I think J. Michael Sturdivant was one of, if not maybe the top target for the staff at the wide receiver position in the transfer portal, and I think that he's showing why in the first week of camp. This staff has done great work in the portal at receiver. Ricky Pearsall, Shamir DK, Elijah Badger, and from everything that we see and everything that we've heard, it looks like Sturdivant is going to be the next in that line. And Florida has hit once again at that position in the portal. They needed to get a guy who was a bigger body receiver that could be a deep threat, that could replace Elijah Badger at the X position. And Sturdivant is checking every single one of those boxes. He's polished. He's added size since he got to the University of Florida. He's running really fast as well, despite that added weight. I want to say, looking up at some of the comments that Billy Napier had made about him, I was a little bit surprised, to be honest, Keith, because I didn't realize that he had the background, or excuse me, that he had the track background that he did. But Sturdivant is a former guy that ran track in high school, and Napier revealed that he ran a 10.3 in the 100 meters. But more importantly, at Florida right now, this offseason, 6'3", 218 pounds. Napier said that Sturdivant is running 23 miles per hour. And for those that don't know, that is like an exclusive club that Florida has here on the football team of guys that can clock 23 miles per hour. I want to say about a year ago, there was only like 2 or 3 guys that were in that category. I think that number has doubled since then. Cormani McLean has joined that club, and J. Michael Sturdivant has joined that club. Surprisingly, Devin Moore is actually one of the guys hitting 23 miles an hour. They've got some bigger body players that have some size and added weight that are still running really fast. So Sturdivant is one of those guys, and honestly, Keith, for us to be 18 minutes into this episode and just now be talking about the receivers, we're kind of doing them a disservice because they've been standing out in camp.
We're both counting the clock, or keep referencing the clock here. But the interesting thing is on Sturdivant, and Billy Napier said this, he sees some parallels to Sturdivant and Shamir DK. Both of them had started their college careers with some pretty good seasons, and then their numbers dipped a little bit. So as a staff, you're trying to figure out why. Were they injured? Were they not just a good system fit? Whatever. But they both came to Florida looking to elevate their careers, and they both arrived in Gainesville hungry and motivated. He sees a lot of what he saw in DK in J. Michael Sturdivant, and they think that he's going to be a guy that gets things headed in. It's not like the guy stunk at UCLA, but he had 60-plus catches as a true freshman at Cal, I believe. So they want to get that guy back now that he's bigger, stronger, faster, got a better quarterback, playing in the SEC, better people around him. So they think it's going to be a winning combination. 2 more football questions real quick, Zach. The offensive line, some interesting developments. Bryce Lovett looks like the guy at right tackle. The other positions, looks like a lot of the same guys that were starting last year. You got Austin Barber, you got Jake Slaughter, obviously, who I should point out, recruits are telling me they're at practice and they're blown away by Jake Slaughter. The leverage, the intelligence, all that stuff. And I asked one of them, Zach, I said, if nobody would have told you that he was an All-American last year, would you have been able to see that he was an All-American? And that player, that recruit said, yes, you can tell. You can absolutely tell. So that's what we want to hear if you're a Gator fan. All right, but a couple interesting things. Love it. I wanted to just get your thoughts on him and how he's looking. And then, I wrote about it today, but if the backup quarterback is your number one most important backup position on a team, left tackle might be number two. Like your left tackle goes down, you got to have somebody there or you're in trouble, right? And so Fletcher Westphal is emerging as the guy as the number two left tackle. So if you could talk about Bryce Lovett, probably the starter at right tackle right now, and Fletcher Westphal, potential number two at left tackle, what do you like about those two guys, Zach?
Yeah, well, first of all, they're both really good finds for Florida, I think, and for different reasons. Lovett was probably one of their lower rated linemen, and for what he's provided in his time at Florida, they really got a lot. I think he's over. He's outperformed maybe what some of his rankings were. And the guy's played all 5 offensive line positions and still can. I want to say that Rob Sale. I have to go back and read his quote, but he said that Bryce Lovett is one of the most talented linemen that he's ever coached in that ability to be able to play all 5 positions. That is something rare to find and a skill set to find. So he has, though, settled in at right tackle, and I think it's very clear, just kind of seeing the writing on the wall and the other guys that are in contention at that spot, that this is Bryce's job to lose. There's still a lot of spring camp left, and there's a whole summer and fall and ways for guys to improve their body and their standing or maybe hurt themselves. So we don't want to just crown him yet, but it's clear that he is the favorite to win that job. I think what's big about Fletcher Westphal, Keith, is he's actually one of the higher rated guys that they've signed at the offensive line. And I think that's not necessarily a position where they've been able to bring in a lot of highly rated guys. But the ones that they have, we hear great things about their development and what they potentially are going to be for Florida. And another one is Rod Kearney. He was really highly rated coming out of high school. He's just playing guard now and is kind of stopped cross-training at center. I think they're really liking Fletcher Westphal and Rod Kearney as kind of two of the future pieces of the offensive line. And you're right. I think if Austin Barber were to roll an ankle or have to miss a series, Fletcher is the guy that they're running out there right now at left tackle. He's changed his body. He's added weight, but a lot of it is muscle and fat that he's lost. And it's crazy how much more pounds he's put on. And Sale said, like, the guy doesn't even look like he's added anything. But that's kind of how well he's developed his body. I think that this is a big opportunity for him. Barber's going to be gone after this year, so he'll be taking over that left tackle spot in 26, but do expect him to get a lot of opportunities and some snaps in 25.
All right, that's enough for football. We could talk about football all day, quite frankly. We can go position by position, and but we got basketball.
One thing I want to shout out is Jaden Woods, man. Okay. Like, we keep hearing so much about that kid. I think that there was
an edge,
yeah, edge, and specifically Jack outside linebacker, which is obviously, I mean, if we're being honest, maybe you could point to nose tackle as well, because they did lose their top 2 guys at that spot. But to lose Jack Pyburn and TJ Searcy to the portal and what that kind of meant for that position and how they were going to have to replace that production from both of those guys, the way things have kind of worked out in that George Gums has kind of taken the lead there at that Jack spot, likes to carry the flag, I think, this year, coming off of that FSU flag plant. But then you got LJ McCray playing the Jack position. Probably one of the biggest storylines of the spring is that he's moved to that spot. You got Kofi as well that they added there, but Jaden Woods is the guy. He's been one of the stories of the spring, just how much, I should say stories of the offseason, just how much buzz that he's generated in winter workouts. He's carried that over into the first week of spring practice, is playing very violent from what George Gums says. Just a guy that's got a kind of a mean streak that he plays with. Tyler Miles has described him as a freak when I spoke to him about what he's shown in the weight room. So Napier said on Thursday night that Jaden Woods has the DNA to play early as a true freshman. So despite how stacked that Jack room is, you're going to see number 15 out there on defense this year.
Okay. Now we can shift to basketball. As we record this, you're at your home in Alachua County. Friday night, you're going to be in Nashville at Bridgestone Arena. I believe you and I just walked by it a month or so ago. It was a little bit cold. I remember us walking around there, around Nashville. Florida's 27-4. Are they number 4 in the country? I'm getting number 4.
Yep.
Well positioned to earn a number 1 seed in the upcoming NCAA tournament. And today on the Pat McAfee show, Seth Greenberg, former head coach at USF and some other schools who now works for ESPN, said, hey, I think they're the best team in the country. I think Florida is the best team in the country. It's been a heck of a week. Walter Clayton became the first-team All-American in Florida Gators basketball history. And now you go into the SEC tournament. Zach, do you think – and by the way, they played Missouri, which won right before we recorded this. Missouri beat Mississippi State. And now the Gators will play Missouri, the one of the teams that beat Florida in conference play this year in Gainesville. The Gators will play the Tigers Friday night at 7 p.m. Eastern time, and you're going to be there. But does Florida, in your mind, do they need another win to guarantee that number 1 seed, or is it done? Because if they win and Bama wins, then they play each other again, and Bama's sort of on the cusp of a number 1 seed too. So what do you think, Zach? Are they a number 1 seed no matter what, or do they got to win a game or two?
Well, before I give you guys that answer, I do want to get to an ad read, but then I'll give you that spot because I do think it's intriguing how it could play out. But do want to give a shout out to Roback, who's been with us now for several months, and we love the gear that we get from these guys. They're completely changing the game with their incredibly comfortable activewear, and they have released so many items with their new licensed game day collection. And the novel polo designs, clean hoodie and Q-zip designs for some of your favorite schools, including the Florida Gators. Definitely worth checking out. Nobody else on the market is pairing these level of designs with this quality of activewear. Roback's everyday shorts are perfect for a pairing as well. They've proudly been leading the NIL charge too, having signed partnerships with multiple college football stars, past and present. So go to Roback.com, use the code Gators20 for a generous 20% off all new customers, and that's spelled RHOBACK.com. 20% off all performance polos, shorts, and more with the code Gators20. Now, you mentioned obviously their seed right now. They're still projected as a number 1 seed, Keith, but I do think it's important for them to go on some type of run in Nashville, even if it's just one game. I think to be able to cement that number 1 seed, also to maybe not give one of those other SEC teams that are in the mix potentially for a 1 seed, especially Alabama, a shot to maybe get it right there at the end. I do think Florida probably has it locked up going into Nashville. To me, I think unless they absolutely just blow it the first game and a team that's in the range to potentially take that last spot from them, that's probably what we're looking at. Now, the flip side of that, Keith, is what happens if Florida wins the whole thing? What happens if they beat Auburn again in the SEC championship game, or they beat Tennessee, which they split their regular season series? Does now the conversation become Florida's not the 4th 1 seed, but are they the 2nd or 3rd 1 seed? Does that change where they end up?
Could they move up to number 1? Now, in recent seasons, we've gotten kind of mixed signals from the selection committee. Sometimes, teams win 3 games at a conference tournament. They don't move up at all in the season. It's bizarre. But because there's so many – well, for instance, look at Tennessee and Florida, right? They split during the regular season. So if they met in the conference championship game, that would be their 3rd meeting. That would be the rubber game of the 3. How much would they weigh that? What's going on with Duke right now? Well, their top player got hurt on Thursday. What's the severity of that injury? Is he going to be back tomorrow, the next day, the next week? How does that impact things? Auburn's going into the SEC tournament having lost 2 straight. What if they lose a third straight game? So I'm starting to, I'm sure I'm going to be proven dead wrong here, Zach, but I'm starting to think that maybe these conference tournaments are going to mean something. Can Michigan State, I haven't seen what they did Thursday, could a team like that, which has been on a pretty good run, could they push for the 4th number 1 seed? So it's fascinating to watch. I mean, I'm with you. I tend to think Florida's done enough. The non-conference schedule wasn't great. It wasn't terrible. But, it wasn't Florida's fault that Virginia and North Carolina weren't usually what you get. No, North Carolina's a bubble team, for God's sakes. Well, when you schedule North Carolina, you're not thinking they're going to be a bubble team, okay?
Correct.
So you don't fault Florida for that. And so there's a lot of luck in the draw there. All right. You were at the Florida-Missouri game earlier this season, were you not?
Yes.
How did Missouri do it? Was Florida just not the team it is now? Did they have an off night? Did Missouri have a great night? Take us back to that game. And what kind of challenge does Missouri present for Florida on Friday night?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was kind of, thinking that Florida was probably hoping for a rematch with this team. They said that they weren't, but obviously this is big for Florida. To be able to get this team in a neutral site. They snapped Florida's 16-game home winning streak. And really, Keith, they built a 19-point first half lead. Florida was able to rally back in the second half. They got within a couple possessions, but they just could never get over the hump. And that was a game where Caleb Grill, the 6th man of the year in the SEC, absolutely went off that night in the O-Dome. I think he got it. I want to say he started like 7 for 11 from downtown or something ridiculous like that. I think he finished with 22 points, but he just made some ridiculous shots. That was just, it was one of those nights where you kind of just tip your cap to the other team. Florida did kind of rebound in the second half, and their 3-point defense was a little bit better. But another thing that killed Florida that game was the turnovers and the steals as well. The Gators committed 8 turnovers in the first half, 13 for the game. 12 is kind of the number that they want to stay under. So that kind of wasn't what they wanted. Missouri scored 18 points off of those turnovers. So the game just kind of got away from Florida early, like they have done several times this season. They rallied back and were able to make it a game. But, Missouri had 12 steals that night. They were just really active defensively. And it was a tough night for Florida. They obviously are coming into this game. They've got momentum. They're going to get, Missouri, and I think they're going to be fired up for this matchup. And if they can win, again, we talked about, resume and what they can do to improve their standing. To be able to beat one of the teams that handed Florida an L in the regular season, I think only helps their case.
I have got are we both on the screen right now, Zach? I'm having some technical problems here. Okay. Missouri has not been playing great basketball of late.
Yeah.
Right? And Florida, when you go back to the second half of the Georgia game, obviously the first half of the Georgia game, the loss up there was just, about as bad as it gets, right? But since that time, you look, Florida came back from 26 down, took the lead over Georgia,
crazy,
quickly falling, then beat Texas A&M pretty good at home, then went to Alabama and won. And the game really wasn't as close as the score. That's a heck of a place to try to go beat. Look, it's hard enough to win at Alabama when they're just average, and you're talking about a top 10 team for number 1 seed. And then taking care of business on senior night against a solid Ole Miss team. I wouldn't say a great Ole Miss team, but a team that can beat you if you're not having a good night. And obviously the matchup in that game was a nightmare for Ole Miss because of Florida's height. But Florida can beat you in so many different ways, Zach. You've got the 3 guards. They can all score from outside. They can all penetrate. You've got the bigs inside. Then and your bigs, Howe and Condon can also shoot 3-pointers. You've got Denzel Aberdeen off the bench. You've got Chinyalu, who can do some damage underneath. Not like a prolific scorer, but a guy that can get you 6 points and 7 rebounds. Big game. They're really, I guess, and all the doubts about, is Clayton a true point guard? Well, he's first-team All-American, so he did something right. yeah, I guess if there's one Achilles heel, occasionally, like you said, they have some turnovers, free throw shooting, but God, they're really, I mean, every team's got a few warts. Florida's warts are kind of small. This is really, I don't, this is one of the more well-rounded, look, they're 27-4, obviously. Okay, no duh, Keith, but this is one of the more well-rounded teams we've ever seen the University of Florida produce. Do you think, does it matter to you whether they win in this thing, in this SEC tournament or not? I mean, there's no science.
Oh yeah.
To say.
Oh yeah. I
think it matters.
I think this matters. Now, obviously, it probably doesn't matter if Florida wins the whole thing.
Yeah.
Maybe even makes it to the Final Four. But to me, because of the way March Madness can play out, and it's very hard to make it to the Final Four, it's very hard to win it all. I think Florida can win in Nashville. Like I think that's probably more doable for them than winning it all. And that's not to say that I don't think that they can win it all, but like they got to win 3 games in Nashville against 3 teams that they should be able to beat and have faced before as well, so they have familiarity with. Like, I just think if they can get an SEC tournament title and what was, I think everybody would agree, one of, if not the best college basketball league that we've ever seen in a season, to win the title of that tournament that season would be quite the feather in the cap. And it would, if Florida doesn't win it all, or let's say they only make it to like the Sweet 16 or Elite 8, I do think that would, at least have a title that you can have from the season, something that they can be proud of, an accomplishment that they made. But I'm sure if you talk to Todd Golden and the team, they want it all. They're not satisfied with just winning a tournament title, but I do think it matters, and they want it.
If you look who they got to play, Missouri, the one team in the SEC, I believe. Was that the only team to win at the O-Dome this year?
Yes,
the only
correct.
Then you have to beat Alabama, who you just went to, I guess it's Coleman, and won there. But that's a really good team. And then if you win that, we don't know that they're going to play Alabama. I'm kind of assuming that they're probably going to play Alabama. Then you get to the championship game, and there's a good chance you would play Auburn, which until very recently was the number 1 team in the country for half the season. You did win there, so they're at their place. So they're going to be hungry to kind of stick it back to you. Or you might play Tennessee in the championship game. You killed them at home. They killed you up there. Like we said, this would be the rubber game. They might be fighting for a number 1 seed. So there's so many different compelling storylines in this SEC tournament. And then you got to turn around and start NCAA play next week. Exactly. That is it. And I appreciate everybody stopping by.
I got to ask you one thing before we go, Keith.
Yeah, go ahead.
How surprised were you when you saw the stat that Walter Clayton is the first team All-American in school history? That's wild.
I knew it because I'm a nerd and I constantly live on basketballreference.com. So look, Zach, I go through and look at Florida basketball seasons from the 60s, 70s, 80s. I like to see if I can find things. So I did happen to know that, because if you think about it, as great as Neil Walk was, and for the younger people watching, you need to go look up Neil Walk, okay? I mean, 27 points, 17 rebounds a game, I think, his last season at Florida. And a very good era, by the way. That was a good era of SEC basketball. And Florida couldn't play in the NCAA tournament because you had to, most of the time, you had to win your conference to play in the NCAA tournament. That was it. That was the only way you could get in. So why wasn't he a first-team All-American? Well, because a guy named Lou Alcindor was playing at UCLA at the exact same time, okay? And Lou Alcindor became Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who was arguably the greatest college basketball player of all the time, and arguably the greatest center of all time, period, college, pro, anything, the history of the universe. And so that was the guy he was second team to. And then you go back and you look at some other guys, and as great as the Horford, Noah teams were, the statistics were sort of split. Like, that was a great team. They were great players, but the wealth was spread. Vernon Maxwell, great player. But Florida in 86, 87, 88, 89 was not really a school that people talked about with basketball. So you could score 19 a game, but all the All-Americans were going to be from the Big East, the Big Ten,
Sure.
and the ACC. So it really made, and then the 70s were just a void of nothingness, in terms of All-American potential. 90s, some good players. Dan Cross would have been a guy that, if you look back in time, probably should have been an All-American, because he was Walter Clayton in 1994, Zach. I'm going on and on. He was Walter Clayton. The inside game, the outside game, he had the passing, and he got Florida to the Final Four. And quite frankly, they could have beat Duke in the national semifinal game. Absolutely could have beat them. Only lost by 5, led in the second half. And to me, he would have been the guy you said, that's the guy that should have been a first-team All-American. But otherwise, it's impressive. The guy's a fantastic player, and hats off to him. And now let's see if he can go win something to go along with it. Nobody's going to remember that, if you don't win.
Well, and as you know, it's no surprise. I think that there's an extra motivation from Todd Golden and some of these players, because there were some snubs for the SEC yearly awards. Obviously, Clayton got named first team All SEC. Condon got third team All SEC, but no Elijah Martin on the All SEC team. Thomas Howell didn't win Sixth Man of the Year, and obviously Todd Golden with the biggest snub, not getting SEC Coach of the Year. So gives them a little bit more motivation going into Nashville. I do want to get to one more ad read before we get out of here from our friends at myperfectfranchise.net, who have some exciting news this spring. Andy is a big baseball fan, and from his line of work, he's seen firsthand the fantastic traits that baseball players bring to the franchise world. Andy is offering a donation of up to $500 to $1,000 to Florida's Baseball NIL Collective, which is Florida Victorious. If anyone from Gators Online purchase a franchise through My Perfect Florida baseball program, and now is the perfect time to contact Andy to learn more. His services are 100% free, and he's here to help if you have any questions about business ownership with franchises. Head to myperfectfranchise.net to learn more, and you can call or text Andy anytime at 404-973-9901. And that'll do it for this week's show, Keith. Next time we come back on the other side, we'll see where Florida is going for March Madness and the big dance. It'll be spring break for the Florida football team, so no practice updates, but obviously things will continue to get cranking on the basketball side. We appreciate all you guys joining in. If you're not subscribed to Gators Online, make sure that you get in the door. You can get in the first week for just $1. So hoops coverage, spring ball, recruiting, we've got it all. Make sure you guys stay locked in. For Keith Niebuhr, I'm Zach Albaverdi. Take